Howdy Google Ads fans, and welcome back. Let's talk about keyword match types. We've alluded to keyword match types a number of times throughout the previous few lectures, and now we're going to go into each one in much more detail, but first I want to give you an overview of all the different match types at a very top level. First of all, it's important to have a basic understanding of what keyword match types are. Match types tell Google how much freedom they have, and when I say they, I mean Google, when pairing your keywords with search queries. If you recall, search queries, search terms, queries are different than keywords. Keywords are the phrases and words that you put in your ad groups. Search terms are what people search Google for, and depending on how strict or loose you define your keywords by using match types, it will seriously influence which search terms will trigger any given keyword. And to get a sense and understanding of that, I have a chart here that will try to hopefully have this all make sense. There are 5 primary match types. There's broad match modified, phrase match, exact match, and negative match. Okay? Negative match, as it sounds, is excluding keywords. Broad match modified, phrase, and exact match are different ways of letting Google know how they should treat search terms in relation to those keywords. Let's take a look at each one of these match types one by one. And just before we do that, this is really important. It's not just like a little tool or trick in your account. Your account will perform significantly different if it's a broad match keyword or a phrase match or exact match keyword or a broad match modified. Your click-through rates will be different, your costs will be different, the actual searches you're showing up for will be drastically different. So this stuff matters. The strategy with match types matter. And understanding the match types, understanding how match types work and how they relate to search terms and how they influence which actual searches you're going to be bidding for an impression on is really worthwhile to getting this clear. I'll say one more thing. Every account's going to operate different. Again, this is the sort of thing that like a lot of what we're teaching here is there's no specific rule that's going to work for every account. I've seen accounts where broad match campaigns performed terribly, and I've seen accounts where broad match campaigns performed really, really well. Usually a good rule of thumb is for there to be a mixture of all keywords, especially in the beginning. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of each individual match type as we get into each match type in more detail. So let's talk about broad match type first. The symbol being used for broad match, and every single match type has a symbol, and that's how you identify what that match type is in the account. There's different ways to select it. I'll show you in a minute how these different match types look in an actual account. For broad match, there's no symbol, so it's just your keyword with nothing else attached. Broad match means you're giving Google the most freedom possible when it comes to determining if a search term should trigger your keyword to trigger an ad. So let's take a look at an example, and we'll take a look at an example for each one. So we have this keyword leather office chairs, okay? That's the keyword we load into the account. Again, there's no symbol. Our ads might be eligible to show if somebody searches for synonyms of that keyword, variants of the keyword, related terms, different phrases altogether, different words altogether, even different concepts. So for example, an example search term, maybe office accessories. Depending on how Google's feeling that day, our ads might show up for office accessories. And I say depending on how Google's feeling is because they're always tweaking their broad match algorithm. Free office chairs, desk chair rentals, right? Just because we put leather in our broad match keyword doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to show ads when somebody uses the word leather or office or chairs or any of those three. Maybe people will look, again, free desk accessories, right? I don't have that on my list, but free desk accessories, that might be a search term that would trigger a broad match keyword for leather office chairs. And I'm not trying to scare you away from using broad match. I'm just telling you that there's going to be a seriously strong need for negative keywords and good negative keyword lists, and we'll talk about that, of course, in great detail. That's broad match, and it's important for an account to have broad match keywords, and we're going to talk about why that is in the next lecture when we talk about broad match in more detail. Let's take a look at broad match modified. Broad match modified is my favorite keyword type. I find that it's the best way of having control over what search terms actually trigger your ads while also being loose enough to find new ideas to research, experiment, and be a little bit aggressive. The symbol for broad match modified is having a plus sign in front of the keyword in your account. and that modifies that term. So for example, if I wanted to have a keyword where I only wanted to trigger search terms that had chair, desk, and leather in it, I would have leather, desk, chair with a plus sign in front of each word. As we'll see with broad match modified, I can modify one of the terms of my keyword, or multiple terms of my keyword, or all the terms of my keyword. It would be considered broad match modified. The keyword itself would be considered a broad match modified keyword if there was at least one plus sign in front of any of the keywords or any of the individual words in my entire keyword. Ads could show when contains the modified terms plus any other terms in any order. The defining characteristic of broad match modified, let's say compared to phrase match really, is order. All you're doing with the plus sign is saying that that individual word has to show up somewhere in the search term, not necessarily in the order of my keyword. For example search terms that might trigger your ad is free leather desk chairs, chairs and desks made of leather. So you could have additional words and phrases appended or prepended to my keyword, but the modified terms, the terms that have that plus sign in front of it, have to show up in the search term in order for that search term to be eligible to trigger a keyword in my ad group that will then in turn trigger an ad impression. Let's take a look at the next match type down, phrase match. Phrase match, you start getting a bit more control over the search terms that might trigger your ads. And that is done with quotation marks, right? You have a keyword in your account enclosed in quotation marks on both sides. So for example, we have this example keyword. We would put this in our account, office chairs for sale, let's say, again, quotation marks. Ads can show when the enclosed phrase with appended or prepended or without words and phrases are in the search term. For example, office chairs for sale near me, right? We have that entire phrase that I have in my keyword, office chairs for sale, right? Office chairs for sale. Near me is not in my keyword, but it's okay. You could have words and phrases appended to them and your ad might be still eligible to show. The main thing is that the keyword has to show up in the same order. The entire phrase has to be enclosed in quotation marks, and that quoted phrase, which is why it's called phrase match, can't be Google won't reshuffle that order. If it's office chairs for sale, your ads will not show if sale on office chairs or something like that, where the keywords, even if all the words are in the search term, if they have to be in that order. That's phrase match. And there are pros and cons to phrase match. We'll talk about that in more detail as well. Exact match, which tends to be people's favorite, although it's certainly not my favorite, gives you the most control over your search terms, over your keywords. And that symbol for exact match is brackets. Not the squiggly brackets, the regular brackets enclosing your keyword in those brackets. So for example, let's say we have a keyword leather office chair enclosed in brackets. That's what it would look like when I load it into my ad group. Ads can show when the exact term or phrase enclosed in brackets is what the search term is. Now, a few years ago when life was simpler and we were all happier, exact match meant just that. Exact match was exact match. If I misspelled a word, it had to be exact. In order for a search term to trigger an exact match keyword, the search term had to mirror image the exact match keyword that was in brackets. Then Google said, okay, listen, if it's misspellings or very close variants, we're going to still show that keyword even if it's exact match. So if somebody misspells a word, if they misspell leather, and it's a little bit different than how you wrote leather properly as your keyword, will still show an ad. For that exact match keyword could still trigger an ad. Or if it's a slight variation, like plurals, leather office chairs, Google will show an ad for that. And then recently Google made a few more changes to exact match that sometimes they call it semantically similar intent. And I'll give you some exact examples of that from Google themselves in a couple lectures from now when we talk about exact match specifically. But just know that exact match still does give you the most control. Leather office chair would be the example search term that an exact match keyword would show up for. Negative keyword match, which is the most important keyword match to really understand well, because no good Google Ads account could ever be as good as it can be or even close to as good as it can be without understanding negative keywords and negative keywords really well. And of course, we're going to have a separate lecture dedicated to that. But just quickly, the symbol for negative keywords is that minus sign. So for example, these are three potential examples. I might have negative leather, negative free, negative chair exact match. And we'll talk about how three different match types affect negative keywords, because negative keywords could be added using the positive match types. And we'll talk about how that all makes sense in a couple lectures from now. search terms without the negative term. That's what negative match type is doing. So if I have a negative leather, then no search term that includes leather will ever trigger my ad if my negative keyword is applied to an ad group or campaign or a negative keyword list. So for example, desk chairs online would actually trigger my search. You might be wondering, but hey, didn't you just say that chair, which is an exact match negative, Google will treat that with plurals and misspellings? Yes, but here's another case where Google wants to make more money. Google will treat exact match as exact match when you add it as a negative. So if the search term includes chairs, then if you don't have a negative exact match keyword chairs, your ad will still be eligible to show. But there's a second reason. This exact match negative is exact match. What that means, and we'll talk about this in more detail, is that only if I'm only trying to exclude this specifically. So if chair or chairs shows up in a search term, I still want that entire search term to be eligible to show. So free, which is a broad match negative, I don't want any search term that contains free to show. But I do want searches that contain chair, like leather desk chairs or orange colored desk chairs, or whatever it may be, because I have leather here as a negative. So desk chairs online is an example of a search term that could show under negative match, depending on how the negative match works. Now, if this is all a little bit confusing to you, and if this is a little bit of an overload of information, I totally understand, and it makes a lot of sense, which is why in the following lectures, we're going to break down each match type, talk about it in more detail, situations when you would use them, pros and cons to using them, and sort of getting a better understanding of how that all works. So that is an overview of match types. Very, very important to really know them well. You should memorize these match types really clearly. You should be able to answer in your sleep how each of them works, what the symbols are for each of them, because your accounts are going to be built out using every single one of these match types. That's how good Google Ads accounts are built. All of them together. They work in conjunction with each other. They're incredible tools for collecting data. They're incredible tools. Broad match, modified are incredible tools for getting new search term ideas. And I'm going to show you how to do all that. So without any further delay, let's go into the next lecture and talk about broad match, keyword match type. I'll see you guys in a couple seconds on the other side.